So we've already said that you can swear, you can take a vow to be a Nazir by association. So one of the first examples we looked at was someone who sees a Nazir going down the street and he says, "Ahe," which means I will be. And it's assumed that that means I will be like him. So just some very, very compact communication of the thought with reference to another person creates the necessary strength of vow. And we're going to just explore this a little bit more in terms of, relationships with friends, but then relationships inside a married couple. And we'll see how that plays out, because, of course, we've already learned, and we learned in the Mishnah of Nedarim. And we've already said, by the way, that the Mishnah of Nazir is very close to the Mishnah of Nedarim. The whole concepts of vows are very close to concepts of Nazir. We already learned that a husband can annul or render void his wife's vows. So we'll see how that plays out if one of them follows the other into Nazirut. But we're going to start with friends. Misha Amar Hareni Nazir. Someone said, "Oh, I'm a Nazir." So he takes the vow. Veshama Chavero, and his friend heard. Ve'amar Ani. He said, "I." And then someone else said, "Va'ani," and I. Ulam Nazirim. They're all Nazirim. They're all considered to have taken the vow, just with that very, very compact expression. But they're all dependent on the first one. And we know, for example, that, when you take a vow, if it's taken under, let's say, a misapprehension, you can go to a sage and you can have it released. So what if the first person goes to a sage and releases himself from the vow of Nazirut? Utar Harishon. So the first guy gets released. What happens? The Mishnah rules, Hutaru Chulam. They're all released because they're all dependent. They're all dependent on him. And we've seen a Mishnah like this in the Nedarim, actually, where you have a whole chain of people who take vows, all dependent on one or the other. And the Mishnah investigates, well, what happens if kind of the one in the middle is released? Well, we'll see the same thing play out here. So if the first one is released, they're all released. Hutara Acharon. If the last one is released, the last one is remember, the last one depends on the first, but not vice versa. The first doesn't depend on the last. The first said, Hareni Nazir. Mutar ha'acharon, if the last one's released, ha'acharon mutar v'chulam asurim. The last one is released, but the others, they remain bound, because the last one doesn't affect the others. It works forwards, but not backwards. Let's look at the language. Someone says, Hareni Nazir, I'm going to be a Nazir. V'shama chavero, and his friend heard. And ve'amar, and he said, Pi chafi usiri kisiro. My mouth shall be as his mouth, and my hair as his hair. By the way, Kaufman seems to have a mistake here. Kaufman says, Se'iro, his hair like his hair. I'm almost certain this is a mistake. And Vav and Yud look quite similar in manuscript. I think that's where the mistake comes. So I haven't even bothered to give you Kaufman's reading here, but you'll see later on. Kaufman seems to become unreliable in this tractate, and we'll see a bit later on that there are some interesting differences. But this is just a scribal error. So he says, my mouth is going to be like your mouth, my hair is going to be like your hair, i.e. I'm not going to take grapes into my mouth, and I'm not going to cut my hair. Hareze Nazir. He's a Nazir. He's basically communicated the vow. He's communicated enough of the vow to make him a Nazir. Hareni Nazir, v'shama ishto. What if he said, behold, I'm a Nazir, and his wife heard? Ve'amra, va'ani. And she said, and I. At this point, he can overturn Mefer et Shelah. He can overturn her vow, Veshelo kayam, and his one stands. His one stands. Because her statement is dependent on him, but his is not dependent on her. What about the other way around? Hareini Nazirah, she says, I'm a Nazirah. Remember, we learned at a very early stage that the halachot of Nazirut are basically gender neutral. So she can say, I'm going to be a Nazirah. We learned about Queen Helena. She was a Nazirah for 21 years, or 14 if you follow Rabbi Yehuda. So she says, Hareini Nazirah, Veshama Ba'ala, and her husband heard. Ve'amar Va'ani, and he said, and I. Eino Yachol Lahafer, he cannot annul. At this point, he cannot annul her vow. Because implicitly, by saying, and I, he's, if you like, he's accepted the validity of her vow. He's somehow accepted that vow. He's confirmed that vow by adding himself to it, so he can't overturn it. He can't overturn it. Let's see the other way around. So let's continue this marital conversation. These two Mishnayot are separate, but in all editions, actually, they're separate, but they're clearly continuing the same conversation. Well, we'll see why. Hareini Nazir ve'at. Behold, I'm a Nazir, and you. So this is speaking in the masculine, but ve'at is in the feminine. So he's clearly saying, I'm going to be a Nazir. What about you, my wife? Ve'amra, and she says, Amen. She says, Amen. Mefer et shela v'shelo batal. He can annul hers, and, well, okay, Kaufman says his is void. So Kaufman somehow, but Kaufman clearly thinks these two are connected. And by the way, Maimonides does as well. Maimonides has the reading that we have in Kaufman. So Maimonides has, he can annul hers, but his becomes void. When he annuls hers, he annuls his at the same time. I suppose the reasoning is that, it doesn't make perfect sense. And most printed texts, by the way, have another reading. Most printed text says he can annul hers and his stands. And that, by the way, is the reading in the Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud. Okay, well, the Mishnah is a creation of Eretz Yisrael, right? So in Bavel, they got a different, and by the way, Kaufman is a manuscript from Eretz Yisrael. So anyway, in Babylon, they have a different reading. Ve'amra amen, she said amen, mefer et shelah, he can annul her vow, ve'shelo kayam, his stands. That's the reading in the Bavli and in most printed editions of the Mishnah. Let's play the other way around. Let's have her lead. Hareini Nazirah, she's going to say first off, I'm a Nazirah, ve'at, and what about you? We're using the expression at, but we're using it again in the masculine. And you do see it, by the way, sometimes in the masculine. Although maybe there's a textual problem in Kaufman because printed editions have got ata. Hareini Nazirah ve'at. Behold, I'm an Nazirah. What about you? Ve'amra. Now, Kaufman has he. Kaufman has he, ve'amar. Kaufman has he. Kaufman has he, and that seems a better reading, I think. Ve'amar, amen, eino yachol lahafer. He cannot annul. Why can't he annul? Well, he's answered amen. So he's added his nazirut to her vow. I guess it's the same as if in the previous Mishnah he said va'ani, and I. Once he's attached his nazirut to her nazirut, then he cannot annul her nazirut.